Good morning and welcome to the Daily Huddle. Today is Tuesday, where we talk everything communication and relationships. And we do that because we believe that more effective communication makes for better relationships, and better relationships makes for better families, better businesses, better community, and a better life. And I am joined today with my wonderful, beautiful, brilliant co-host, Lee Owens, and she is going to help us dive into the topic of what is your baseline for normal.
Yes.
So, Lee, I am excited to hear why you want to talk about this and how you're going to enlighten us today.
Okay. I love this. And especially with the introduction that you just had on communication and relationships. So our baseline for normal is, how did we grow up? Where did you grow up? How did you grow up? What were your parents like? What was your home life? And that creates a normal. And I'm going to give you an example of one of my baseline for normals that when I got married at 42, I realized was absurd, absolutely absurd. But one of the baseline for normal in my house is that you don't spend time with people you love.
Wow.
I knew your face would go there. And so my family of origin, my mom and my dad and both sets of their grandparents, right? We are like a table. There's a tabletop. All four legs are connected to the tabletop, but nobody touches.
Damn.
So that's how I grew up, is that we will write you a check, but we're not going to spend time with you. But we're family, right? And so that baseline for normal, I didn't even know I had that baseline for normal, right? Until I got married at 42 years old, which is later in life. And so I did not know. So when my husband naturally wants to spend time together and his love language is quality time, right? I'm like, what does this even mean? And I don't want to. And so that is a challenge, right? So what is your baseline for normal? Well, I have avoidant attachment on both sides of my family going back generations.
Can you help us? Like, I want to hear something specific about this. Like,
Okay.
what do you mean didn't spend time together? Like, y'all didn't eat together? You didn't vacation together? Or tell me.
Yes. Well, yeah, yes, that's true. Okay, let me think. We just did our own thing. My parents both kind of do their own thing. And so we all did our own thing. Both my grandmothers were alcoholic. And so both my mom and my dad grew up in alcoholic homes with alcoholic mothers. And so you can see, like, there probably wasn't a lot of nurturing that went on in that family system, and how they just would have had to take care of themselves. So when they got married to each other, an avoidant attachment just means that we avoid closeness to stay safe.
Wow.
Right? And so if you have two parents whose parents are like that, that was their baseline for normal. So my dad worked and did his thing, and my mom played tennis and did her thing. I did my own thing, and my brother did his own thing. And so we all just kind of did our own thing.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, that resonates with me. You know, I'm on my second marriage. I think it's my last. But no, it definitely is. But with my first husband, and this was modeled to me growing up, like I did the grocery store while he did the yard, and I did this while he did that. We always had that. And then when I married Mike, and I'm like, I have to run out to the drugstore, and he's like, I'll go with you. I was like,
What?
I'm used to it now, but like my parents never grocery shop together. And my first husband, like, why would we both go? And now
Right.
Mike and I probably almost always grocery shop together.
Yes. Well, that is the perfect example of what you become accustomed to, and then you bring into a relationship. Let me see. I have another example here that might help people, because that example I gave is so weird, right? That's why I'd said it's absurd, that you don't spend time with people you love. But that can show you how it can show up in a relationship, uh, and cause a lot of problems if people don't even kind of have the language of what we're talking about, right? Is that the person is uncomfortable being close, and the person that wants to be close feels rejected, right?
Yeah, I would love to hear some more examples because I think this could, I mean, everybody has a baseline for normal. So, yeah.
Yes, and that's why we were talking about it today, just so that people who are listening can think, I never thought of a baseline for normal. How did I grow up? What was my family like? And how do I bring that in my relationships, expecting that other people are going to do the same thing I did,
Mhm.
right? Okay, this is a good example. And then Tom sent me a text. In my family of origin, everybody talked loud and they talked over each other, and everybody yelled. So chaos, right? There's a lot
Okay.
of chaos and talking
Yeah.
loud. My husband's family, nobody talked at all. And you had to kind of look and read between the lines to see what people were thinking and feeling. And
Mm.
so you can see again, right? So he gets around my family and is scared to death, right? Because it's
Yeah.
like, what is happening? This is chaotic and crazy. And I get around his family and think, this is the weirdest thing I've ever seen in my life. Like, why are everybody sitting here and nobody saying a word?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And
You
so I was also very comfortable with anger, right? Because that was one emotion that was allowed in my family,
know.
baseline for normal. And then Tom texted me, he said, in his family, don't discuss anything that's going to trigger someone's anger.
Say that one more time.
His family, so Tom's family of origin, one of the kind of baseline for normal unspoken rules of his family were don't discuss anything that's going to make someone else angry,
Oh, yeah.
right? That one, and another one that was unspoken in his family was be perfect to avoid triggering anybody's anger. So he was anger avoidant and
Mhm.
I was anger expressive.
Oh, wow. And y'all have come together like from two opposite worlds.
We absolutely have come together from two opposite worlds. This is kind of how I even have language around this and understanding it, and how we have had to work together to find, because baseline for normal, just because it's normal for your family does not mean it's healthy or that it's good,
Yeah.
right? I needed to change some things. And so did
Mhm.
he, to have a healthy relationship, which is kind of what we're talking about today.
And so do people tend to, because this is what's resonating with me, a couple things. One is another cool example is my daughter, my youngest daughter, Holly, she's 30 years old. She has a boyfriend that's pretty serious and it's been over a year now. But when they first started to get close, they came to visit.
Mhm.
And I said, tell me about your family. And he said, well, we love each other. We're just not as loud about it as y'all are. But there
Okay,
was
yeah.
a lot to unpack in that one comment. Like Holly and I are extremely expressive with our emotions.
Yes.
That,
Mhm.
but we don't get. She doesn't get that back from her boyfriend. I do get it back from my husband, but do you know why? Because he said, "I know you need it." He wasn't raised that way either. Like, nope, there was people not running around in little German town taking care of their gardens and telling their kids how much they love them and how wonderful they are. You're just supposed to know. It's so different. So different.
Yes, that's that example is exactly two baseline for normals, right? Is her boyfriend's baseline for normal, and how he kind of said, well, like, we love each other, right?
Yeah.
But we're just not loud about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes my husband will say that my family is weird, but we're not weird. We're just different than his family.
That I think that's a really, really, really important. We need to like pause in that, is nobody's family is weird or bad. It is how we grew up. And could there be some healthier components? Yes. Right. In my family of origin, did I need to change and realize? Right. It was when my husband went to the hospital. I'm going to tell on myself. I'm going to tell this story,
Okay.
but it's embarrassing. And now I'm doing it. But anyway, so my husband goes to the hospital, and he's having a surgery. And we were in a small group at the time, and somebody else's husband was having a similar surgery, and she went to the hospital every day and was staying there. And I was so confused. And I was like, why is she going to the hospital and staying there? And kind of even like weird. Well, when I said that and I saw everybody's facial expression, I was like, y'all are judging me. I was like, I'm being judged right now. And really, everybody was like, yeah, because you should be judged. Like, this is terrible. And I just was like, I don't want anybody to be at the hospital with me. I don't want people to feel like they have to take care of me. I know it's awful to stay at the hospital, so I wouldn't expect anybody to be with me. And my parents weren't ever going to be with me. So I had no idea why anybody would stay at the hospital. And so Tom said later, he said, Lee, he said, you do that for emotional support. You come to the hospital for emotional support. And I was like, really? And he was like, yeah. And he was like, what if I need something in the middle of the night? And I said, well, that's what nurses are for.
Right.
I, and so like, and he was no, like, no,
Yeah.
like, no. And so I will say I have changed over the 16 years. And every time he goes to the hospital now, I go pack a bag, spend the night. I'm there for all of
Yeah.
the things, emotional support, and to run and get things when someone needs them. But that is, yeah, I had no idea. And when I say I had no idea, I mean, I told this story and then looked at everybody's face and realized, right, that, oh, I've said something that has landed really poorly with everyone here.
Yeah. There's so many examples. Like my friend, her husband was in the hospital just one night. It's 15 minutes from home. I was like, why don't you just go home and sleep and come back? But she didn't. So I feel a little bit more like you. Like he's a grown ass adult.
Well, that's exactly what I thought. And so
She's like, no, I'm staying there with him. I'm like, okay.
I know. Well, okay. So these are perfect examples. And this is what we're asking people today. Just what is your baseline for normal and how do you show up? And could your baseline for normal use some tweaking?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Could we become healthier? Could we look and see, like, relationally, am I showing up and meeting needs of my partner in a way that feels good to them,
Mhm.
even though it feels awkward to me?
Yeah.
Could I change that? And so that we can always continue to grow and
Mhm.
continue to learn and continue to love better,
Ooh,
right?
I
Love.
love that. Yeah.
Um, and my husband's actually taught me a lot about connection and connection being safe. Um, and that being close to the people that you love is actually a good and pleasant experience instead of, I kind of, my dad had a lot of rage, anger. And so being around people with a lot of rage, anger, it doesn't feel very safe and it's not very fun.
Mm-hmm. Mm. You know what?
And
I wonder about something.
okay.
So because I would imagine in your world and your
Uh-huh.
work, you see this. So if our baseline for normal, if there's something about it that we know is not pleasant,
Hmm.
then do we tend to grow up and then as a parent or an adult, like sometimes overcompensate and go the complete opposite way? Because I see some of those patterns about me from a child.
100%. People who many times maybe have been neglected as a child, like severely neglected as a child, they tend to overparent as an adult because they're coming from the space of their own wounds, right? And they don't want their children to feel um, what they felt. And so they kind of overcompensate for it and kind of overcorrect,
Yeah.
which can lead to some challenges.
I can see that for me, my mom was not a very happy person most of the time. And so I was
Mhm.
absolutely determined to have dancing in the kitchen and joy and laughter. And
Yes.
I think that I had overcompensated to a point because for a long time, I was like, oh, things could be worse. We'll just, cheer up. It's going to be okay. Let's turn up the music and dance. That solves things. And I think
Yes.
I taught that, especially to Wilson, like
Mm.
not to cope with heartache, just to kind of like, you know what? I'm still going to be happy and bring the party. And boy,
Yes. Yes, and see that's a great example of the overcorrection, and it ends up not producing what you wanted to, but your heart, the whole thing is, I want my children to be happy. Like I want to provide happiness and joy. I want to provide an atmosphere in which we can be lighthearted,
Yeah.
right? And so we don't realize that then that teaches people sometimes to then not pay attention to the reality and overlook it.
Mhm. How have you, with this uncovering, like just stopping and considering like how you were raised and what your baseline for normal is, how has that helped people to grow and heal? Like,
Well, remember how I always say this is a tagline always. We cannot change what we do not acknowledge, and we cannot acknowledge something that we don't know is there, right? And that is the introspection of looking at ourselves and our relationships and challenging ourselves. If there is something going on in the relationship, that relationships are challenging. They bring joy and they're challenging because they rub up right against against our baseline for normal, kind of how we grew up. So the healthy place is self-observation. We cannot change anybody else. The only person we can change is ourselves. So if we're disgruntled or we have some complaints in our relationship about our relationship, the first place to look is ourself,
mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Which people don't. We generally look out and we want other people to change so that we can feel better.
And then how do you like if someone uncovers this,
Yeah,
then I think oftentimes like I have one example is a friend of mine's son went to therapy
yeah,
like twice, and the therapist said, You've experienced some trauma." And he
yeah,
was so angry because that was criticizing his parents.
yes, yep,
Yeah. So
yes.
how do you help people to overcome that? There is no perfect parent from what I know about.
Well, that's exactly right. And what we're saying is what I tell people when they get that protective, I was like, that's the way it should be, right? That we love our parents and we're not blaming. To name something that is true is not blaming, it's understanding. How did I why am I in this situation? Or how did I come to believe what I believe? Right. And naming what is true is not saying, it's not blaming and saying, well, I'm this way because it's my parents' fault. Right. I'm not saying, oh, I'm blaming my mom and dad and I have no power to change. Right. The power to change is agency, is saying, okay, yeah, I can see how generations of my family, I used to say when I was younger, they shouldn't have had children. Right. I mean, because they weren't children oriented, nobody on both sides of my family line. So both sets of grandparents, they really didn't even want to see their grandchildren. They didn't want to see their children or their grandchildren. So I didn't have close relationships with my grandparents, but Tom, growing up here in East Tennessee, right? Everybody here is a mama or a papa. If you're a grandparent, you are a mama or a papa, and
That's
you're
funny.
close, right? And those people are very close to, like Tom had wonderful relationships with his grandparents and his grandmother, right?
Mhm.
Who loved and nurtured him and made him feel special.
Yeah.
Mine didn't care. They didn't really want to see us. And so I didn't really grow up knowing that that relationship was important.
Mhm. Yeah.
Right.
I experienced the same with Billy, my first husband, that his grandparents, he was very close to his extended family. We didn't have that. I mean, I saw my
Yes,
grandparents maybe once a year. That was it.
that's right. So what happens is we just form what is our baseline for normal
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
start to live that out. And so all we're suggesting is my baseline for normal, is it the healthiest way that I can be? Like I've had to make
Mm.
positive intention to change the way that I live in order to be more fully present for my husband in our relationship, because I didn't grow up like that and he did. So he kind of describes me as kind of Well, it's smart, intellectual, disconnected, and angry.
Really?
Well, I would say if you asked him today, I've really changed a lot of that anger over the last 16 years because I've been able to name it and understand it and heal from it. But no, he was right in the beginning. And the disconnected part, I didn't really know that I was disconnected, right? I didn't know that connection felt uncomfortable and awkward for me until I was exposed to somebody who wanted it.
And so how do you encourage others who realize that they're not truly connected to the people that they're closest to? Like, how do they get past that discomfort? Like, where do they start to change that pattern?
Well, most of the time it is, first of all, like what we're saying is connecting the dots. So kind of understanding there's nothing wrong with you. You're not weird or bad or defective, right? It's what you learned. And if you have a desire, you can change that, but you're going to feel uncomfortable and that's okay,
Yeah.
right? You're going to feel uncomfortable doing something different. I kind of tell people it's like writing with your non-dominant hand in the beginning. When we're learning new ways to live and new ways to show up in the world, it is going to feel like writing with your you can do it. We can all do it. It doesn't look very good and it takes a long time and it gets a little frustrating. But what's
Mhm.
important? So what is important to me today is to be a healthy, balanced person and I have healthy relationships. Well, if I want to have a healthy relationship, then I'm going to need to invest in that relationship. I mean, it's not just going to be healthy because I desire a healthy relationship, right? I'm going to have to be a need meter, right? I'm
Yeah.
going to meet somebody else's need, which, quite frankly, I'm selfish.
You are not. You always say that.
I know, well, but ask Tom. I mean, the work that we're doing here and what I'm sharing on this podcast and what I do in my own work as a therapist is, and I do not dole out anything that I have not digested myself, right? Like I've taken all of this in
Awesome.
myself, um, applied it to myself and
Mhm.
learned it and realized, we can say, oh, I want to have a healthy business, or I want to have healthy relationships, or I want to have healthy family that enjoys doing things together. Then, okay, well, if that's not a natural place for you, what can you do in your own life to make that happen? Right. So I'm having to do some things and in the past do some things that feel a little bit uncomfortable.
Okay. You know what I'd like to say about this
Yeah.
is something that you taught me, and I have said it since you sent this to me a bunch of times, and it is
Okay.
that peace is not the point of a relationship, love is. And so that
Yes,
means sometimes having those hard conversations.
that's right. And a lot of times people are scared to have the conversations, right? So like let's take, for example, Tom's two baseline for normal uh, belief systems, which is do not make people angry, right? He would have been scared to ask me for what he needed in the past.
Wow. Yeah. Looks like Sorrel wants to chime
Yeah.
in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, I don't know if that's what you're saying, Lee, but I love this conversation. If I'm hearing you correctly, baselines for normals, uh, we all have them because we were
Yes.
all born in a family, we're all raised the way we were raised.
Yep.
And then what I call love
Yeah.
is what showed up in my baseline for normal.
Yes. Yes.
So, so in my baseline for normal, my father did transportation work from two cities, so dad was never home.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And yet, whenever he'd come back home on a Thursday or on a Friday evening, he'd have a little basket of mangoes
Yeah.
and a basket of fried fish. And that was my love. I couldn't wait for dad to come back home on Thursday with those two little baskets, right? And I'd sit there, eat up a storm and run and go play outside.
Yes.
So in the world here in the United States, it's like I had to learn
Mm.
that being away wasn't like being away was what I must do. That's what I
Oh,
concluded. If you're a
yeah.
dad, you got to be
Yes.
away,
Yes. Yes. See, like
right?
that. Yes, Sorrel, what a great example when that's what you learned and it felt like love. So that's why would you not think, okay, if I'm gone, right, and
Yeah.
I'm working,
As long as I bring goodies back, I'm okay.
that's right. And then you might have a partner who says, like,
Uh-uh.
no, you
Uh-uh.
can't be gone. And you're
Exactly.
thinking, what do you like? That feels awkward for me to do
Yeah.
this. And partnership. And so that's a great example is the partnership, what you learned and what feels like love for you might feel like disconnection to someone else.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and what I'm growing for myself right now is the capacity to ask for what I need
Oh, yes.
and be the space where another can ask for what they need. And I don't have to compare because the way I used to see it is that, oh, well, if you don't do it that way, you actually don't love. But what I'm hearing you say is that no,
Mhm.
in a baseline for normal, love just shows up differently.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. Yes. Love shows up differently. And then in let's say that the people that we love need us to show up. My husband needed me to show up differently.
yeah,
And I get that because I was so disconnected that how can you have a relationship with someone? Which is why I said it was absurd,
yeah,
right? Is how can you have a relationship with someone if people are leading two separate lives?
yeah.
Um, but
So, so my dad turned 92 and he's got in the backyard in Miami, there are three mango trees. And one of our fondest conversations is, will the mangoes actually bear fruit this year?
okay, I love
And
that.
every June, he'll pack a box of mangoes from Miami and mail it to me.
Oh.
And and so we still do this stuff. We live apart from each other,
Mhm.
and I get mangoes.
But see, I love that because you had a good relationship with your father figure from childhood that brings back when you talk about him and you talk about those mangoes and when you were telling the story about running in and grabbing the mangoes and the fried fish and it was so good, your whole face, lit up. And so, and that you're still carrying that tradition as you talked about that today with your father. And so your male relationship with your father figure was healthy and good. And it brings you happiness to talk about it. And that's not everybody's story.
Nope.
Yeah, and so thank you for creating the space for that to show up.
Yes, I love that. Thank you for commenting. It's so good. I love these talks.
He said something that gave me reason to pause, and he said that he's learned to ask for what he needs.
Yes.
And I feel like for a lot of people, that's hard for me. Is that common for a lot of people? Like it feel like some will say, well, I shouldn't have to ask, which is, people can't read our minds. But then having the strength to say, maybe to my husband, like, I need you to stop criticizing my inefficiencies because they're different from you. That
Yes.
doesn't mean you're wrong.
Right. Well, because you grew up with very kind of similar, I'm going to say to I did with, and I'm just going to name this as emotional neglect to kind of tie it into our other, because nobody paid attention to your emotions and you were getting up at 5 years old and getting yourself dressed and becoming independent. And this is a conversation maybe we can take to the next time as your needs became shame bound. And so, and what that means is yeah. And so,
Throwing that in at the closing, Lee. Go ahead.
well, it's what happens, and so the needs become shame bound, and so what'll happen now is for you to ask for what you need will feel shaming. You'll hit shame before you're able to ask for the need, um, and so that feels scary and wrong and very vulnerable, and people don't want to do it. But that will be the topic for our next one: is how our needs become shame bound.
Okay. That's going to be fascinating. Well, give us a
Well,
last tidbit before I close us out about the power of really, what is your baseline for normal, and then what is the power in uncovering that?
Okay, so I'm going to use this again because I think the more repetition is the mother of skill.
Yes.
So being able to say, we cannot change that which we do not acknowledge, and we cannot acknowledge things that we don't know are there. So just understanding your story, right? So tying this into your story work, right? What is my story? What was my childhood like? Where were my parents? What was their childhood like? How has my childhood informed my adult life? And just ask questions, not to find anything wrong, but just to see how does my childhood inform my adult life and my adult choices and my adult relationships?
Wow. Yeah. I think that gives me some strength and peace because I think a lot of us think, I was a kid, I should be over it by now. But if we never acknowledged it, it's still informing our behavior today, right?
150,000%.
Yeah.
Everything we've ever experienced, and this gets into neuroscience, which we don't have time for, but every emotion that we've ever experienced is held in our implicit memory in our right brain, and it's what gets triggered in our adult life.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. So all we want to do is to stay curious and then and see what can we do to like be different and bring love into the world and love to ourselves and love to other people and exchange that. And so if we don't know what's there, how can we do that? So that's really what we're here for, is to understand, not to blame.
I love it. I love it. I'm so glad you're a part of this community and that you're here and you have these beautiful messages that are based in so much experience and so much hard work. And now we have a way to shine it out to the world. So thank you. And I will
Yes.
close us out with our 7 tenets. And you listen carefully because you're doing this next month.
Okay, I'll do it.
And
All
the
right.
first of those is love. So remember to communicate, to lead, to show up, loving yourself and giving that to others. And remember to give, to be generous of your time, your talents, your heart. Be generous. It will come back to you as well. And also always take time to laugh. Throw that head back, let those endorphins flow. And
Yeah.
take care of yourself by trying to stress less. And what does that mean? Putting more plants and more water in your body, getting more sleep, and getting up off that booty and moving that body each and every day. So
Absolutely.
thank you all for being here on the Daily Huddle, and we will see you next time.
See you next time.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you, Tara.
Thank you.